Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here this evening and joining our webinar about the Legislator Accountability Project. We have a lot of ground to cover this evening. We'll be walking through how CenterPoint bills got so incredibly high, as well as the changes that we need to get the outcomes that you all so fiercely deserve. We'll be touching on how ratepayers have organized and fought back over the years, as well as what are the next steps with this accountability project. We will wrap up with a Q&A, so feel free to type questions into the Q&A function as they come up, but do be patient with us because we're going to wait to answer the bulk of them until the end of the webinar. And my name is Kelly Hamman. I'm the Director of Development here at Citizens Action Coalition, so grateful that you're all joining us. We've got a great group here this evening. Our Executive Director, Kerwin Olson, our lead organizer, Bryce Gustafson, and our organizer, Ryan Stratman will all be presenting this evening. And just a little bit about us really quickly. We here at Citizens Action Coalition are the oldest and the largest consumer and environmental advocacy organization here in Indiana. We were founded back in 1974, and since then we've helped save Hoosiers billions of dollars in excess utility charges. So I know you all know it is an uphill battle, but we don't give up and we keep fighting. And wins do happen, you just got to be persistent. We work on a variety of issues here in Indiana. Utility issues are definitely our bread and butter, but we also engage on pollution prevention, healthcare, and family farms as well. There's really three main ways in which we advocate. One is which is through grassroots organizing, right? Bring in communities together to advocate for the outcomes we need and deserve. We also do advocate at the Indiana State House. Our executive director, Kerwin, goes down and makes sure that legislators are hearing about how bills will affect their constituents, since they're hearing plenty from the utilities themselves. And we do also engage in the regulatory realm. When utilities like CenterPoint file to raise your bills, we've got a legal team that works to push back. With that, I will pass it to our executive director, Kerwin, to talk about how bills got so high.
Great. Thank you, Kelly, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for joining us. Yes, I am, as Kelly said, Kerwin Olson, the executive director at CAC here. I've been honored to be the executive director since 2011, and I've been with CAC for 20 years now. I was going to give some brief background before Ryan and Brian do their presentations, but first wanted to talk quickly about the regulation of the utilities here in Indiana. While we're not here to talk necessarily about the IURC, it's important to sort of understand the IURC and the various agencies that have a role in utilities. First of all, we do have what's known as the OUCC, the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor. State law requires that the consumer counselor be an attorney, and the consumer counselor does serve at the will and the pleasure of the governor. That's something that CAC has discussed and thought about in the past as something of the statutory representative of the public maybe should be elected by the public. But here in Indiana, that individual serves at the will and the pleasure of the governor. The OUCC is not a regulatory agency per se. They don't set rates. They have no authority, no jurisdiction over the utilities, but they are the statutory representative of the public that participate in virtually every proceeding and be on behalf of the public in general, not just residential customers, but all rate classes, large commercial, small commercial, residential, so on and so forth. Secondly, we have the primary body that oversees the investor-owned utilities here in Indiana. That is the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, the IURC. It's important to understand the primary function of the IURC or any regulatory commission. When we first established these commissions a little over 100 years ago in this country, was to act as a surrogate to competition, understanding that these are monopoly utilities. They have no competition. So therefore, in exchange of the privilege of a franchised exclusive service territory with captive customers, they would subject themselves to regulation, known as regulatory bodies in Indiana. It's the IURC. Their primary function also is an economic regulator. They are not an environmental regulator. They don't issue air permits and make decisions based on environmental considerations necessarily. They are what's known as a creature of statute. They are formed by the General Assembly and act in accordance with the powers and authorities granted them by the General Assembly. And of course, their rulings also need to consider state policy, but their primary function is the economic regulator. We have 5 commissioners, all of who serve at the will and the pleasure of the governor. We are one of 4 states in the entire country where our regulators serve at the will and the pleasure of the governor and are either not directly elected by the public, as is the case in 14 states, or confirmed by one or both chambers of the state legislature, which is true in the other states. Only 4 states, Indiana, Nevada, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, have regulators that effectively serve at the will and the pleasure of the governor. Again, that is something CAC has talked extensively with legislators for over 50 years now about bringing some change to how our commissioners, our regulators are chosen. So the legislature does play an important role in the structure of the IURC. State law says that no more than 3 commissioners may be of the same political party as the governor. Doesn't say must be 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats, just no more than 3 may be of the same political party of the governor. One of the 5 commissioners has to be an attorney. And as I mentioned, the way in which we select our commissioners, we have an IURC nominating committee, which the governor has 3 appointments to, and each legislative caucus has an appointment to. So there are 7 members of the nominating committee. They receive applications, they conduct interviews, and they send 3 names to the governor to choose 1 commissioner. So it's a rigged system from our perspective, considering how the game works. Governor can pretty much pick their person by and large, get that person as one of those 3 names, and pick their person. IURC obviously sets the rates of return for investor-owned utilities like CenterPoint. And, they approve. Anytime your utility bill goes up, it must be approved by the legislature. Despite popular opinion, CenterPoint and the other utilities cannot just raise your bills of their own accord. They must be approved by the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission through a tariff and have a tariff on file at the commission that represents the rates that you are being charged. And just to make folks aware, all of the REMCs in Indiana and virtually all of the municipal utility in Indiana are not regulated by the IURC. They are not under the jurisdiction of the commission. You can go to the next slide. Thanks, Kelly. Now, as I said, legislature plays a role in how we select our commissioners, but they also have a substantial role in terms of the rate hikes that we have seen on our utility bills in recent years. Most importantly, they have passed an extraordinary amount of bills that authorize what are known as trackers. Those are additional fees, bill riders, adjustable rate mechanisms, whatever you want to call them, that allow utility companies to raise your bills in between rate cases for specific things, such as construction of new power plants, such as pollution control investments in power plants, such as grid upgrades, transmission, and distribution. It effectively allows them to recover the costs on an ongoing basis through your bills, and those trackers can be adjusted annually, quarterly, or semi-annually, depending on exactly what those trackers are. One of the big challenges with trackers is that it really, you're talking about monopoly utilities whose primary responsibility is their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to deliver earnings and dividends to their investors. So they are fairly profligate with capital, if you will. They want to spend a lot of money. The more money they spend, the more money they make. The more money they make, the more money they send to their investors. So you give them these trackers that allow them to effectively raise bills only for costs and capital spends. What you're doing is you're removing a significant incentive for that monopoly utility to control their costs, watch their spending, and be more fiscally responsible. Before trackers, utilities primarily only had rate cases in which they could raise your bills, and rate cases were largely looking backwards in terms of, hey, we spent this much on our transmission system. We built a new power plant. We invested X, Y, and Z in this. Please give us our money back. And if the commission felt they were prudent, reasonable, and just investments, they would approve those. But they had to pay for those things themselves, finance through investments, finance through debt, and then recover those costs after the fact. Trackers allow them, from our perspective, to file gold-plated plans with the commission, spend a lot more capital than they otherwise would need to, basically gold plate their system and unnecessarily raise rates. I will say, in fairness, trackers do sometimes lead to rate reductions in those reconciliation filings. But generally speaking, trackers are a significant contribution to raising rates, and all of those trackers, or almost all of them, are legislatively authorized through General Assembly, through bills proposed every session. And again, the challenge, as this says, it reduces the IURC's authority. Those bills have lots of words like the commission shall approve, the commission shall approve. And by eliminating their authority, by reducing the flexibility and discretion of those commissioners, then you're removing the ability of them to do their job, which is what? Again, act as that surrogate to competition. In addition to passing an enormous amount of tracker bills, especially going back to 2011, they are also stifling consumer protections, stifling energy independence, stifling customer choice. Monopoly utilities have used their power, their influence, their cash to block pro-consumer bills from even receiving a hearing. We've seen many great consumer bills, positive consumer bills introduced by legislature over the years that never even get scheduled for a hearing in committee. So it's not that these bills aren't moving. It's not that these bills are getting voted down. They're not even getting heard. In addition, we all know this, probably on this call, but we have seen Senate Bill 309 in 2017 that phased out net metering in Indiana, making it far more difficult, far more expensive, far less economic for homeowners and businesses to go solar on their roofs or perhaps install wind at their farms, at their school, by changing that financial compensation incentive that customers would receive for the power they send back to the grid. Furthermore, not only did they phase out net metering in Indiana is statutorily prohibited. Even if a utility wanted to offer net metering, state law prohibits them from doing so. 3 years before that, we had a great program called Energizing Indiana, product of Mitch Daniels. Yes, that raging environmentalist, Governor Mitch Daniels, not only created Energizing Indiana, but he also created the strongest energy efficiency standard in the Midwest, an order from the commission that CAC celebrated wildly. Energizing Indiana was beginning to work, was beginning to actually lead to a reduction in monthly customer bills, as Commissioner Zigner pointed out in an interim study committee once. For the first time ever, we're seeing a downward trend in customer monthly bills, seeing a reduction in customer usage. Less usage means less money. But 2014, the General Assembly, not only killed Energizing Indiana, they statutorily prohibited the commission from ever creating something like Energizing Indiana again, which was a third party running an efficiency program for the state. And we added community solar here as well, because community solar is now something of great interest that could provide some choices for customers, help bring some bills down, bring some clean energy onto the grid. Community solar bills have been proposed for at least the last 4, 5, 6 sessions. Not a single hearing on one community solar bill, in State House. So, not only do they use their influence to get their tracker bills and other stuff that they want, they use their influence to block good things from even getting heard. And furthermore, the only competition that the utilities had in the state was rooftop solar effectively and energy efficiency, allowing customers to use less of their products. So they got rid of those things as well that provided customers any sort of control or choices when it came to the energy usage and their energy bills in their home. And the result, here you go. Here are, we noticed with the 2025 bill survey from the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission that comes out in every July, that, wow, 2024 to 2025 bills really went up, and they sure did. We saw an average increase across the state of $28 a month. CenterPoint at $44 a month. Sadly, $44 a month wasn't even the highest in the state. We saw NIPSCO bills in Northwest Indiana go up $50 a month. And that's the largest increase that CAC has seen in at least 2 decades. We say at least 2 decades because we looked at the data from 2006 through 2025. I suppose we could go further back and look, but we didn't really feel like we needed to. This was an enormous increase year over year, and the affordability crisis is very, very real, hitting consumer pocketbooks hard and only getting worse. And that's why we're here today to talk about what folks can do to help change that situation here in Indiana. Because solutions exist. Not only do we need to repeal some of this anti-consumer legislation and related trackers to give the IURC back the discretion, the flexibility, the authority they need to do their job, but increase the incentive for CenterPoint, other utilities to manage their costs efficiently between rate cases. At top of mind for CAC is we absolutely need to guarantee universal service for all. Beyond that, we need to guarantee uninterrupted universal service for all by reducing, if not eliminating, disconnections, especially during the hot summer months. And we have nothing in place on a statewide basis to assist low-income electric ratepayers struggling to get their bills paid. We should be preventing utilities from using all those ratepayer dollars for lobbying, campaign contributions. They spend an extraordinary amount of money down at the State House. We looked at it a few years ago and noticed that $1 in every $4 contributed at the State House when we looked at it then came from the energy and the utility sector. And we need solutions that give customers control over their energy costs, restoring strong energy efficiency standard, restoring net metering or better policy for rooftop solar and customer-owned self-generation, and of course, authorizing independent community solar in Indiana. And again, going back to the first slide, the legislature loves to point the finger at the IURC all the time about these rate hikes. IURC loves to point the finger at the legislature about being a creature of statute, if you will. But the reality is they are both complicit in the problem here. The legislature holds all the power. Legislature holds all the cards. It's the legislature that can reform the process before the IURC about how our commissioners and our regulators are selected, what that process looks like. So it's the legislature that holds the majority of the power here. And that's why we're here tonight talking about this stuff. And with that, I believe my time is over, Kelly, and I will turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Kerwin. Whew, we're getting fired up, y'all. Now we're going to turn to our organizer, Bryce Gustafson, who's going to share how you all have been organizing and fighting back. Bryce?
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Kerwin. Thank everyone for being here tonight. I'm Bryce Gustafson, the program organizer with Citizens Action Coalition. I started back in 2009. I was a canvasser or canvas director up until about 2019. So when I became an organizer, one of my tasks was to help communities across the state, and there's no exception here with CenterPoint. In late 2021, there was a proposed rate increase from CenterPoint, and a couple folks down there decided to start a Facebook group called Direct Action Against CenterPoint Energy, or DACE. We went down for a field hearing at the time and met up with those folks, and for about the next 2 years, Evansville was my second home. I love Evansville. I love the folks down there. But they decided to get together, and we immediately, again, helped as much as we could. We started with educating folks down there. That's a constant issue, constant battle, if you will. There's always new people coming into the DACE group. There's currently over 16,000 members. I think at one point it started off with 1,000 people, then it went to 10,000. Now it's over 16,000 members in the DACE group. It has been the core group has been an important force for advocating for ratepayers down there. There was a lot of folks that showed up to the city hall saying, "Hey, you all need to do something to help us. You have more power than we do," and of course, spreading awareness. Building relationships with city councilors, with state lawmakers, with the media down there to advocate for that much needed change. It's a long road to go as far as it goes, I should say. Which is one of the first things I told the group is this is a long-term proposition, and we started doing video calls and I see a lot of people on the call from those video calls every Sunday, every other Sunday. And you get a lot of people coming in and then a few people dropping out, but there's still a core group that's holding down the fort in the DACE group. So really appreciate everybody's efforts there. Next slide, please. That has led to those grassroots efforts have led to making an impact. As I mentioned in the city council decided to engage in the last CenterPoint rate increase fight. They hired an attorney, and they were showing up to the Meet Your Legislator events. They still do, and talking with legislators there. There have been some legislators who have been reticent to vote for consumers. They're starting to shift. That's become a huge topic in those spaces. There's been, again, just tons of media reports. At one point, I think that was the most media that I've ever seen at CAC was coming out of Evansville about what was going on down there as far as the bills. And just fairly recently, we've seen small businesses who are finally fed up with what's going on there. So they're expressing their frustrations. And there has been talk of kind of forming a coalition within small businesses to make their voices louder as well. So next slide, please. And all those efforts really culminated at the February 29th, 2024 IURC field hearing. Normally field hearings, we're seeing more participation in field hearings, but a normal field hearing goes about an hour, hour and a half. You might have 20, maybe 30 people testify. You got a couple people maybe that are okay with the utility. Most people are opposed. But that hearing was, and it was heart-wrenching to hear some of those stories, absolutely. But it was one of those amazing moments where I think it was, the most impactful, one of the most impactful days I've ever seen in doing this work for 16 years. But there was 2 meetings scheduled. I believe it was at noon, well, excuse me, 1 and then at 5. So many people showed up at that 1 o'clock meeting that they just had to bleed it over into the next hearing, and that hearing lasted for over 9 hours. The first 2 people who testified was the mayor of Evansville and her opponent. There was a second person that testified, and it went from there. It was a marathon, but again, there was so many people that showed up and told their stories, and it was incredibly impactful. I had an opportunity to record it, which is on our YouTube page if anybody wants to watch that. But it's really spoke to the struggle that's been going on down there. Unfortunately, the IURC, as Kerwin alluded to, because of those trackers, had to pass a lot of those costs on to ratepayers. Yeah, I'll stop there. I really appreciate everybody being on the call, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bryce. And really a powerful display of unity. So we will hear from Ryan now, who will talk about next steps. Ryan?
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for taking time to come out and watch this. So question now. So we see that legislative rate hikes have enabled CenterPoint to raise rates, essentially giving them a blank check. Companies like CenterPoint have used their influence, spending millions of dollars to stifle any kind of competition that may come about. The IURC, although has some statutory powers, has been handcuffed in several ways by the General Assembly. So we've got this, and now that we know this, and we know that the pressure and the obligation is on the state legislature to provide some relief, how do we go forward? The best way to reverse these trends for us is to communicate with your legislators about the changes that we need. And the best way to communicate that is in person. These it's proven that that's the most effective way to influence policy changes, and it's a great way to build a relationship and to advocate for that change that we desperately need. And it's important that you share your neighbor stories. If you're a small business owner, that adds a little bit of icing on the cake. If you attend a house of worship, that's another thing. Some of those buildings are 100 years old or older, and that's affecting the way that your house of worship is being run. Those are the kind of stories that are going to be critical for you to tell these legislators so that they know what's going on. Next slide, Kelly. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So this is we're calling this the Legislator Accountability Project. And the action item here is that we need you to meet with your legislators. We need you to share your stories, and we need you to be an advocate for yourself, your neighbors, your community, for policy changes. And Citizens Action Coalition, as discussed, has over 50 years. We've been here for 50 years. We have a lot of institutional knowledge and experience in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to support you throughout this entire process. We'll hold an in-person training session to prepare you to meet with your legislators. We'll guide you through the process of scheduling those meetings and following up if they don't respond. And then at the end, after you've met with them, we'll debrief with you, learn about your experiences, hear about what they've told you, and what if they make any promises or they make any commitments that we can hold them to those. Next slide, Kelly. So the in-person meeting is going to be on October the 16th at Central Library in the Evansville, at the Evansville Central Library in the Browning Room. If you're unable to attend, we'll coordinate with you so that you get all the information that you need and all the support that you need as well. During that session, we're going to share some talking points that you can give to them. We're on the ground at the State House every day that they're in session, so we know a lot of these legislators, and so we will provide rebuttals on things that we anticipate they may say. And then we're going to ask for specific legislative requests for you to share with your legislators. So if you go back, earlier we were talking about some of those solutions, reversing trackers and those kind of things. Those are the kind of things that we need if we're going to have fair utility rates here in CenterPoint territory. That training is also going to give you an opportunity to connect with other participants, your neighbors, people that live in the same community, same neighborhoods as you. So it's a great opportunity to network and to build relationships. And then after that training on the 16th, we will provide you additional support with whatever you need, any questions, any help that you have throughout this process. So we're going to have your back from now until you complete this. So it's important to understand that you're not going to be alone. Next slide, Kelly. So here we have the QR code if you want to scan and sign up. We also have a link that I'm going to drop here into the chat. Give me 1 second here. I'll drop this into the chat. You can click on that, enter in your information. And that's, again, thank you all for coming. And understand that this is the kind of thing that we need to make these changes. And that, I live here. I'm a local organizer. I live in Evansville. I pay CenterPoint bills too. And I've been paying CenterPoint veteran bills for a long time. And I know I'm on the ground. I've seen the impact that it has on my friends, my family, my neighbors, my community, my church, other businesses. I see it all the time. And if we're going to, if we're going to make any substantial changes, it starts tonight. It starts now. And so with that being said, and we'll turn it over to Kelly for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And absolutely correct. We obviously saw at the beginning of this webinar a lot of legislation over the last over a decade. So there is no magic bullet, right, to get the solutions and outcomes that you deserve, but this is the start of pushing or the continuation of pushing in that direction. So if you've got questions, please type them into the Q&A feature. And we will read them out loud. We can't respond to raised hands, but please do type any questions that you have. Um, if you haven't already, our website is a wealth of knowledge. So we've got a lot of information about different legislative sessions, different legislator voting records, so that you can find out more about, the issues that have caused electric bills, your bills, to keep going up, up, up. You can, on our website, do a lot of things, including chipping in to help us keep up the fight. You can sign up for emails and text messages to stay in the loop, and you can take action on different consumer and environmental issues that are impacting Hoosiers. We've got again, the QR code at the bottom. So please feel free to scan that to sign up for participating in this accountability project. Great. Let me check some things here. I see Kerwin has also dropped a really nice link to our utility affordability page, which does highlight a lot of the issues that we've discussed this evening. Okay, let me adjust a couple of things. And here we go. Gallery, great. And we will get started. Kerwin, I'm going to kick this first one to you. What is the fuel surcharge on our bills?
Well, I would note Christopher just put in the Q&A that
Oh.
they can't see the chat. So just FYI, but we could send those links out, I suppose, through email. The fuel charge is actually one of those trackers that you see on your bill for the electric utilities. It's the FAC, the fuel adjustment clause. And you'll see a GCA, a gas clause adjustment for the gas utilities. It's a very prominent tracker in terms of there's a significant amount of things that run through that tracker. It was one of the first trackers that was instituted, and it's one that CAC and most folks don't necessarily object to. It is a charge for a direct pass-through for the cost of fuel, whether that be natural gas for the power plants or natural gas to heat your home, coal for the power plants, whatever sort of fuel, oil, etc. It also allows, that's where utilities will collect for the power purchase agreements, the PPAs that they have in place for, those are primarily wind and solar. Those are things utilities, don't necessarily make profit on. It's a direct pass through in terms of those costs. And the reason it's less objectionable is trackers or those mechanisms that allow utilities to adjust rates outside of the context of a general rate case really should be reserved for things that are outside of the control of the utility generally, and things that are difficult for the utilities to plan for. So the FAC, that fuel tracker, has been in place for a very, very long time. There are folks proposing, changes to, those fuel adjustment mechanisms because they can be abused, if you will. But at a high level, that tracker has been in place for a very long time. And when trackers really started becoming an issue at the State House was in the late 2000s. And we would actually use the FAC or the fuel tracker as an example. I hate to say it, but as an example of a good tracker, if you will, because it was an example of costs that largely were outside of the control of the utilities and things they couldn't necessarily plan for. Everybody does their best to sort of forecast what fuel costs will be in the future. We're pretty good at that stuff, but we see significant disruptions to fuel supplies, especially hurricanes, natural disasters, blizzards, deep freezes, things that freeze power plants, pipelines, coal piles, those sort of things. And we'll see significant skyrocketing in price. One of the Texas freeze being a recent example, but I can remember the extraordinary increase in natural gas prices in the late 2000s because of Hurricane Rita and then Hurricane Katrina. Gas shot up to 12, 13, 14 bucks a therm, and folks were sort of outraged at their utility bills. But again, that was a direct pass through for those costs. So that's what that charge is. That's where you'll see the FAC on your electric bill, the GCA on your gas bill, and that's what that is. That's one of those trackers, but a less objectionable tracker. That's not a tracker for things like grid modernization, if you will, distribution lines, transmission lines, those sort of things. That's strictly primarily for fuel and the cost of power purchase agreements for renewable energy, which again is a straight pass through. Utilities don't make a profit on those wind or solar PPAs.
Thank you very much, Kerwin. We've got a question here, and I'll read it, maybe answer a little bit, and then let you all fill in as well. But many people don't know how their decisions at the voting booth shape the reality we are now experiencing. Are there civics lessons that you provide? And great question. I think we will be educating people on how their specific legislators have voted over the years. As we prepare them to meet one-on-one with them. I think for me, having observed legislation in Indiana since 2013 when I started with CAC, I've seen us have to work really hard to get legislators on both sides of the aisle to advocate for consumers. And so I think that's a really important compass that we have, is that the utilities are very good at lobbying everyone, and they have lobbyists to touch base with everyone. And so we have to work to educate everybody on how we can get their legislators to focus on some of the outcomes that we know people need. Kerwin, Bryce, Ryan, anything you'd like to fill in?
Well, I would add that first of all, yes, preserving and protecting an accountable democracy is at the heart of CAC's work. However, this is an opportunity for me to give a shout out to our colleagues and our friends that we work closely with, folks like Common Cause, folks like League of Women Voters. We're part of what's called the Alliance for Democracy in Indiana. We've worked very, very hard on redistricting reform. Back when maps were being redrawn, we're still part of that alliance, and we meet on a monthly basis with those groups and others that are part of that alliance. So yes, we believe strongly in civics, strongly in voting. But I would also say that, there are many, many groups out there that work on get out the vote campaigns, civic education, most notably Common Cause and League of Women Voters, who are longtime friends and colleagues of CAC. So yes, CAC is definitely part of a vast network statewide and also nationally that work on areas of good governance and civics. So yeah, good question.
I think I'll shift a little bit more too, because I do remember in the early days of DACE, especially with how starkly bills went up for a lot of people, a lot of folks felt that something illegal was going on. And I think we've seen that a couple times, just when people are hit with really high increases. And so a lot of the education over the past few years has been explaining the relationship between regulators and the Indiana General Assembly to explain the heartbreaking reality that this is all totally legal. So our next question is, speaking of lobbying, can you explain how the Indiana Energy Association works with the government? And Kerwin, I'm putting you on the spot a lot, but this is a question
yes.
that's ripe for you.
Our dear, dear friends at the IEA. Well, first of all, they are originally the Indiana Electric Association, representing only the investor-owned electric utilities. They expanded, of course, their reach to include the investor-owned gas utilities, so they changed their name to the Indiana Energy Association. They are a trade association, a membership group. I believe all of the investor-owned electric and gas utilities are members of the IEA. I don't know that for certain, but I believe so. And Citizens Energy Group, the charitable trust here in Indianapolis, is also a member of the Indiana Energy Association. And how do they work? Well, first of all, understanding lobbying at the State House, each individual utility company has an army of their own lobbyists. So the IEA is not the only arm, if you will, of the energy utility industry that is lobbying down at the State House. CenterPoint, Duke, I&M, NIPSCO, AES Indiana, Citizens Energy Group, as well as the big water utilities like Indiana American Water, Aqua, have lobbyists on the ground working very, very hard every day. So it's larger than just the IEA. The IEA has two lobbyists on the ground, the president and the vice president. They hold conferences, they hold meetings. Generally, the utilities speak with one voice through the IEA. It's become a little more common in recent years, but generally speaking, when I first started my first session almost 20 years ago at the Indiana General Assembly, the individual utilities did not testify publicly at committee. All of the testimony was given by the IEA, the Indiana Energy Association. That holds true today, where the IEA is the forward public-facing voice of the utilities, if you will. In public testimony, in public statements, you'll see them being the ones to testify in committee. So they're a unique entity. Other states don't necessarily have that single sort of unified voice of the investor-owned utility started by, I believe it was started by former Secretary of State Ed Simcox, who saw value in that for the investor-owned utility. So it gives the investor, even though they don't need any help, you know, the investor-owned electric and gas utilities don't need any help. They've got deep pockets. They are out there wining and dining folks, not only in downtown Indy, but in their communities at state houses and or at the city county buildings and everything all throughout the state. But the IEA is the center point, if you will, the trade association that represents the investor-owned utilities. They do a lot of campaign contributions. They do a lot of wining and dining, a lot of research, a lot of media outreach, a lot of presentations, handouts, that sort of thing. So it's a centralized repository, if you will, for all the grossness that goes on with energy and utility lobbying. I would say, at the state level, that's the IEA is that voice. They mirror what the Edison Electric Institute does at the national level, where EEI sort of represents nationally the investor-owned electric utilities. The IEA represents the electric and gas utilities here in Indiana. But they're not the only ones on the ground. The utilities also have an army of lobbyists that work directly for the company and also contracted through the big firms in downtown Indianapolis. The utilities do a very good job of trying to lock and load as many lobbying firms as they can, so nobody else can hire anybody. It's a good strategy that the deep-pocketed special interests deploy. It's tough to find somebody to lobby on energy and utility interests in the state of Indiana that isn't conflicted out because of having a contract with one or multiple utilities.
Thank you so much, Kerwin. And I think it's that combined effect of their immense lobbying presence with the very generous campaign contributions. And then we also know of other things like nice meals and sports tickets and things like that. So we are up against a lot. And I know you all know that very intimately. But that is why the one-on-one relationship that we need you to build with your legislators is part of what's going to help push for the change that people need. Because, Kerwin's down every single legislative session and we're seeing the traction. We're seeing the synapses fire. We just got to keep pushing because there are real protections that could help to alleviate a lot of the issues that people are going through. I think one thing that has stuck out for me following DACE over the years are the great lengths that people go to stay warm in the winter without relying on CenterPoint for heat. Things like using kerosene, things like, immense space heaters, shutting off rooms in their homes. Some people are engaging in dangerous things to stay warm and going without to stay cool. And the reality is there are solutions, and that's what people deserve. So we would really love your participation to help push forward for some of those protections. Kerwin, we've got another question. Is the Indiana Energy Association headed by the former chief of staff of former Governor Pence?
No, negative.
No. Okay.
The current president of the Indiana Energy Association, actually somebody I know well, I would consider her a friend, Danielle McGrath. She is a former executive director for the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, who then moved to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, our good friends at the IEDC. I believe she was one of the executive directors at the IEDC, and then she accepted a position as the president of the Indiana Energy Association. So yes, she did work for the Pence administration in the context of working at both the IURC and the IEDC. She was not Mike Pence's chief of staff, but she did come out of the Pence administration into the Indiana Energy. Well, probably the Holcomb administration by the time she got the IEA job.
Thank you, Kerwin. And we are recording this, so we will make this recording available after the fact. I'm seeing that someone learned quite a bit from the town hall with Representative Alex Burton last night, and they look forward to making a difference, which is great. So it is really exciting to see a legislator already responding to, the immense issues with utility that you all are facing. And I think that's the other piece to keep in mind is you all have kind of been the canary in the coal mine. And we've seen, not quite a 9-hour field hearing, but we have seen folks with other utilities who have shown up in force at utility field hearings, rate case field hearings, saying very similar things, which is that we cannot afford much more. So you guys are not alone. There are people all across Indiana who are also pushing for affordable bills. And we appreciate your leadership so much. I'll give another minute for questions, but I think we're wrapping up. Keep in mind that we will be following up via email with some of these resources that we've put together tonight. And then do remember that we're planning for a meeting on October 16th where we'll train you to meet with your legislators. And from there, we'll again walk you through the process of setting up meetings with them and also following up if they don't respond, because we know sometimes you got to be persistent with the legislators.
Yeah, I see that comment. I did forget that Danielle did have a spell as deputy chief of staff, so thank you. I had totally forgotten that, but that is correct. Yeah, I see that in the Q&A, Kelly.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome. Well, let's see if there are no more questions. I think we will bid everyone adieu unless Kerwin, Ryan, or Bryce, any final closing remarks, thoughts or feelings we want to share.
I just wanted to touch on the civics piece because I think that's really important. I learned that during the canvassing days when we went up to somebody's door and we were saying, Bryce CAC fighting CenterPoint. I can't tell you how many times the president of the United States or somebody else was blamed for their high utility bill, and it really is not the case. I mean, the amount of, as we've talked about, but the amount of oversight and accountability that the state house has on our utility bills is overwhelming in their on their side of things. So I see that occasionally. Again, it goes in phases. Sometimes it's more prevalent online, but I think that's a really important piece that folks on this call and that I do and Ryan does when we're talking to people is to make sure that those who are responsible have the most responsibility. That's where that's where people's voices need to be directed at. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, but thank you all.
Yeah, no, excellent point, Bryce. And that's why it's important to remind, as politely as you can, legislators, their role in this affordability crisis, because again, the General Assembly created the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. The General Assembly created the process by which our regulators are selected and put in their position as commissioner. And let's not forget, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission issues orders based on Indiana laws that are passed by the Indiana General Assembly. The regulation of retail electricity is not a function of the federal government. The regulation of retail electricity and all retail intrastate commerce is a function of the state, governed by the laws of the state of Indiana, which are written and acted by the Indiana General Assembly. So always don't let legislators simply point fingers at the IURC in the context of this affordability crisis, when legislators play a significant role in the governance of the commission, the selection of the commission, and the laws by which the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission issues those orders that lead to rate hikes in your mailbox every month.
Well said. Awesome. Well, folks, we really appreciate your time tonight and your participation, and we look forward to connecting more next month and in the coming months as we move forward with this project. We thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we look forward to being in touch. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.